Hello, my name is Lano, and you're listening to Lano's Corner, where I talk about something for half an hour or so, unscripted and usually from memory. This month I'm going to be talking about writing, because I am, of course, an author, but I'm not very good at just talking about writing, just standing up on my pedestal and lecturing the youths, because writing is different for everybody. So what I've done instead is I found a list of interesting questions for writers, and I'm going to answer them. I'm going to interview myself. I strongly suspect that nobody is going to watch this except for my friends who are also authors, but, maybe it'll be helpful. Maybe it'll give some advice or encouragement to younger authors or people just starting out. And yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to it. And of course, I couldn't do a video about writing without plugging my own book, which is called The Ghost, and I'm going to put a link to it here and also in the description below. If you like middle grade fantasy, you might enjoy it, so feel free to check it out. Now, these aren't numbered, and I don't know how many of them there are, and I don't know if I'm even going to keep all of these questions, so I'm just gonna get right to it then. What is the first book that made you cry? I don't know if I can say with any certainty what the first book is, but I do have two notable examples. The first one is Magic's Price from Mercedes Lackey's Last Herald Mage trilogy, which I talked about in depth in my Valdemar book ranking video, which I do intend to put on this channel after I re-edit the audio. But you can just say that I really relate to Vaniel, so I cry every time I read those books. The other one would be the first time I read the His Dark Materials series. It was actually kind of funny because we were on vacation at the time, and I had just gotten to the part where Lyra has to go to the underworld and she leaves Pan behind, and she's just watching him watch her from the dock as she leaves, and it's horrible and depressing. It's a really great scene. So anyway, we're on vacation. I'm in my room reading this, and my mom comes in to tell me that she and my stepdad are going to go for a walk on the beach, and she comes in and I'm just sobbing my eyes out, and she's just like, "Oh my God, what's wrong?" And I'm like, "This book is so sad." And then, she's like, "Whatever, we're leaving, have fun with that." So I remember that making me cry a lot. Those are probably the two biggest ones, but any book that makes me cry gets an automatic A+ from me. Does writing energize or exhaust you? Oh, it definitely energizes me. I have something that we'll call a personality flaw, where if I don't write for a few days, or God forbid, an extended period of time, I get very cranky and short-tempered, and I snap at everybody, so I need writing as much as I need sleep or food or air. I do it all the time, constantly, and it pretty much keeps me going. What are common traps for aspiring writers? The quest for perfection, definitely. When you read a book that's been published, it looks so easy and effortless, and like the whole thing was just planned that way. But of course it's not. And when you're just reading a book, you can't see how much effort went into it. So I think a lot of aspiring authors go in thinking that they have to get it right the first time, and you really do not. Writing is all about write it now, fix it later. Write it now, fix it later. It's basically the motto for my existence. So they get so caught up in little nitpicky details in the first page. There's so many stories about people who will write one chapter over and over again and never write the rest of it because they're so obsessed with getting the first chapter right. That's not how it works. If you want to write a book, write it now and fix it later. What is your writing kryptonite? Erotic scenes, definitely. Even if I'm just writing something mushy and romantic, I get really embarrassed and I have to take frequent breaks, and my face is bright red the entire time. Anytime I try and write anything even remotely spicy, it just doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. I don't write erotic scenes. I would find it very, very difficult to do. And I'm glad that I don't write for an age range where that's necessary, but if I ever was going to write something older or try and expand on some of the things that I've written, where I do the much more easy fade to black method for my erotic scenes, it would be difficult, to say the least. Do you try more to be original or to deliver to readers what they want? I write for an audience of one, and that someone is me. I write what I want to read, first of all. I don't really care if other people like it. The people who like it will find it. But I think the idea of originality is so overhyped. I'm not saying go out there and plagiarize something, obviously. But, we have stories like Cinderella, which is one of the oldest stories in the world. Almost every culture has some version of the Cinderella archetype fairy tale. We have been telling it for thousands of years, and people still like it. You don't have to worry so much about being 100% perfectly original, because it's not going to happen. You're always going to be inspired by stuff. And you should try to be original in the way that my books are original, because even if somebody else wrote the exact same plot, they wouldn't write it in the same way that I do. So you shouldn't focus on your plots or anything being super original and never before seen all the time, but you should focus on how your ability to tell a story is original because it comes from you and nobody else has your experiences and your thought processes. Do you think someone could be a writer if they don't feel emotions strongly? Yes, and I say this as a writer who does not feel emotions strongly. I am extremely disconnected from my emotions, to put it mildly, but I understand emotion from a logical point of view. I have a degree in psychology and a degree in sociology. I'm good at studying people, and I understand how someone might feel if presented with a certain set of stimuli, which makes it sound very scientific, but that is how I write my books. But I've never had anybody tell me that my emotions don't seem real. People tend to like my characters and their emotions and their relationships, which is a point of pride for me because it's the thing I care the most about. You don't need to feel emotions yourself, necessarily. If you don't feel emotions strongly and you have a hard time displaying that on a page, what you should do is pay attention to real people and pay attention to books and movies and video games and whatever media you consume, and form a sort of repertoire of emotions in your head that you can pull on when you want to write similar scenes. You can compensate anything with the right kind of research. If you could tell your younger writing self anything, what would it be? Take care of your damn arms. Seriously, get up, stretch. I used to sit down and write 12 to 15,000 words in a day, and it was really awe-inspiring, and people thought I was really cool, and now I have severe tendon damage, so was it worth it? No. Take care of yourself. How did publishing your first book change your process of writing? I don't think it did. It was definitely a learning experience, and it gave me an idea as to what I consider publishable and what my drafts should look like and what sort of things I should aspire to, but in terms of the way that I write, it didn't change anything. How many unpublished and half-finished books do you have? Roughly speaking, because I don't know the exact numbers off the top of my head, but I have one published book. I have 14 or 15 books that have fully completed drafts of some variety but are not publishable yet. They're not publishing ready yet. And in terms of stories that are partially written, novellas that I want to expand, and things that I've just done a little bit of free writing for, somewhere around 19 or 20, I think. And the number of ideas for things that I want to write that I haven't even started yet, astronomical. So many. I'm never going to write everything that I want to write, even if I live 200 years. What does literary success look like to you? To me, being a successful author is writing something that people enjoy and have an emotional response and connection to. I'm not going to sit here and say that I wouldn't love to make money off of my work, because I would, but I don't write for the money, and I don't really have any interest in being famous. Hitting the top of the New York Times bestsellers list or whatever is not one of my goals, and it never has been. My goal from the very beginning has been to write stories that cause people to feel things. And I've already done that. So I've met my childhood goal, but I just want to keep going and be better each time, you know. What kind of research do you do, and how long do you spend researching before beginning a book? The key word here is before. Before I do a book or start a book, I don't generally do any research. I sometimes do a little research while I'm writing a book, but usually I do my research after I've finished the first draft or the first several drafts, and I'm beginning to do the harder work of once I have the plot figured out and I want to put in all the details. That's usually when I do my research. One of the things that I have to research all the time is how long it takes to travel certain distances by certain methods. So like on foot or on horseback or by boat. I'm not good at math, so I have to look up those kinds of things every time I need them, which is a lot. And I write fantasy novels, so I spend a lot of time researching different governments, different title systems for like nobility, royalty, the military, stuff like that. There was one really particular one where I had to look up a bunch of information about boats because I have a book where the characters spend quite a lot of time on a boat, actually. And I wrote 6 drafts before I ever looked up anything about boats, and it turns out that I got everything that I could possibly get wrong about a boat and how they work wrong. I don't understand boats at all, apparently. So that one stuck with me, but I write world-built fantasy, so I make up a lot of stuff myself, so I tend to research more general things like that, not specific things, because nothing that I write is connected to our world or our history. What's the most difficult thing about writing characters from the opposite sex? I don't find it difficult to write characters from the opposite sex. I don't believe in gender. Gender doesn't exist. And I'm pretty sure that while you would have to make some adjustments to the plot of a book, you could gender swap my entire cast of characters from any given book, and you wouldn't have to change much about their personality in order for it to work, because I don't believe or care about gender. I just write about people. My characters aren't defined by their gender, they're defined by their opinions and their hobbies and what's demanded of them from the plot and how they cause the plot to change by being there. And I do actually, sometimes I'll read through a book and I'll be like, oh no, I have too many male characters or too many female characters, and I will just swap the gender of a character or multiple characters and make no other changes. So my characters' personalities are not tied to any particular idea of gender because I don't think gender is important, and I just write about people. So no, I don't have any issues writing about male characters. I do tend to write more female characters because I have certain ideas about female characters and what kinds of personalities and storylines are lacking in books for female characters that I want to correct. Although things are getting a lot better now than they were when I was a kid. And also, I'm a lesbian, I like women, I like writing about women, but could most of my female characters be turned into male characters with very little effort, and vice versa? Yes. How do you select the names of your characters? Vibes. Seriously. If I have a certain vibe that I want to go for the setting, then I'll look up names that are similar to that. I have a book where I wanted it to feel Mesopotamian, so I looked up a bunch of Sumerian names, things like that. Sometimes I completely just make it up off the top of my head, and sometimes I review the list. So when I was in college, I think this was when I was in college, I went through a baby name website and I compiled a list of every single name that I liked. And if I just really don't have anything to go on and I don't have any ideas for character names, I'll go through the list until I find a name that vibes with one of the characters that I have, and then I will go through the list and look for other names that have a similar feel. especially if I'm looking for names for a romantic couple or something. I want their names to feel good together. So it's just all about vibes, honestly. Do you read your book reviews? How do you deal with bad or good ones? I do read all of my reviews. I was very lucky in that every review that I got for my book has been positive. Unfortunately, a great deal of them have been lost because my publisher went out of business, and due to reasons that I won't go into, all of my reviews got deleted. So I don't really have them anymore, but I do have screenshots of them and I like to read them. And almost every review that I got, although it wasn't very many, was 4 or 5 stars. However, the very first time that I put up a piece of writing online, so I wasn't exactly a new author, but it was my first time sharing my work with the world, you understand. And the very first review that I got on a piece of work that I shared was brutal. This man just ripped my writing apart, and I'm talking paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs, all of which basically boiled down to, you're a talentless hack. Why are you doing this? You shouldn't be writing. You're a fucking idiot. You contribute nothing to the world. You should be ashamed of yourself. No one is ever going to want to read anything you have to write. You know, just that for paragraphs on end. And I cried, and I had an existential crisis, and I almost considered giving up writing. I didn't write anything for 3 days. That's how long it lasted. I considered giving up writing for 3 days, but in the end, I couldn't do it. Because you know what? I'm not writing for that guy. Fuck him. I'm writing for myself. And as long as I enjoy it, it doesn't really matter. But that being my very first review has given me an incredibly thick skin. Now, it did turn out that that guy just literally did that on that website. He would find people posting their first work and just be as rude as possible. And I learned that because somebody else had made it their mission to go back and re-review everything that he had reviewed and mitigate the damage. But it didn't happen for a few days. So I had a few days where that was the only review I had ever gotten on anything I had written. Don't sweat it. Don't let that stuff get to you. The people who like your work will find it, but you're never going to please everybody, and you shouldn't try to. If it's actual literary criticism, that's a little bit different. The way that I kind of go with that, and it's based on a piece of advice that I read a long time ago, is that if somebody tells you that something seems off or strange or doesn't work for them, then you should listen and you should review that part and see what you can do. But if someone tries to tell you how you need to fix it, you should ignore them, because the only one who can decide what needs to be fixed and how it should be done is you. But people can tell you if something seems off. But you also shouldn't think that you need to follow every single piece of literary criticism you receive. Go with your gut. You are the writer, you make the decisions. Not every piece of literary criticism you receive will be valid to you. Like, I have this writing friend, and she's brilliant and talented and funny, and she and I beta read each other's work all the time, and we both really like each other's stories, but we have completely different writing styles and priorities, and we don't actually like the way we write. I don't like the way she writes, she doesn't like the way that I write. So some advice that we give each other is not going to be valid because we have completely different styles. So yeah, always read your literary criticism, but whether or not to follow it is up to you. And as for just bad reviews, move on. It's not worth your time. What is the most difficult part of your artistic process? Rewriting, editing. It's hard for me. Every time that I do a new draft of a book, I open up a new document and I completely retype it. And that makes it incredibly easy to make large changes to your plot. And I recommend this method to everybody. If you try and edit a book by doing line-by-line changes, you're going to be caught within the bars of the cage of the story that you have already constructed. If you want to actually be able to edit a story and a plot and make changes, you need to rewrite it. But it is an incredible amount of work. How long on average does it take you to write a book? Each individual draft of a book takes me on average 4 to 6 weeks. but I can't work on the same project over and over. I get bored, so I have to swap up what I'm working on. So from the first draft to publishing ready, it could take years, but any given draft, 4 to 6 weeks. Do you believe in writer's block? No, I do not. I don't think writer's block exists. I do think that people may not know how to properly motivate themselves because motivation is hard and it's different for everyone, and our society doesn't do a good job of teaching us how to understand ourselves and how to motivate ourselves. Unfortunately, that's a personal problem, and the only one who can fix it is you. If you had to give up either snacks and drinks during writing sessions or music, which would you find more difficult to say goodbye to? If you asked me this a year ago, I would have said music, because I like having background noise. But since I got hurt and I have to use a transcription program, there can't be any distracting noise and my voice has to be very clear. So now I would say drinks. My throat gets so dry whenever I work on something because now I have to say all of it out loud. Picture this. You feel uninspired and you've sat at the computer for an hour without conquering any words. How do you get your creativity flowing? 2 methods. The first is the most useful. That's called lower your standards and write it anyway. If you're sitting there and you have an idea for a scene that you want to get out and you just cannot get it out the right way, write the shittiest possible version and move on. Again, write it now, fix it later. Lower your standards, write the crappy version, and then go on to something that's easier for you. If you don't have any ideas and you just want to work on something but don't really know where to go, then what I would do is write something silly with no consequences and no expectations. So maybe I'll write a high school AU where my characters have to turn in a science project. What science project would they do? There's absolutely no pressure for something like that. And sometimes doing a little exercise like that can help you get in the mood for writing, and then you can go back and do what you're actually supposed to do. Do you like audiobooks, physical books, or ebooks better, and why? I like physical books. I think they're easier to read from than ebooks. I like owning things also and being in control of the things that I own. I just like the look, the feel, the smell of physical books. But I do like audiobooks for long car rides. I'm glad that ebooks exist for the people who like them, but they're not my thing personally. What is your preferred font to write in? I write in Calibri, and then when I'm taking the old draft and putting it into the readable draft so that I can start a new version, I switch it to Times New Roman. So I read in Times New Roman, but I write in Calibri because I like the way it looks. Do you feel like it's most important to have strong characters, mind-blowing plot twists, or epic settings? Let me say something controversial here. Plot twists are fucking stupid. Now, I am someone who has read a lot, and I can almost always predict the plot of something. There's this anecdote from when I was younger and the first time I watched Blade, where at a certain point in the movie, one specific event happens, and I said, oh, because of that, this'll happen, and then that'll happen, and then this'll happen, and that'll be the end of the movie. And my stepdad legitimately turned off the TV because I accurately predicted the last 20 minutes of the movie. I'm that kind of person. But even if you're not like me, even if you don't read as much as I do or are not a writer, a successful plot twist works once, and then the second time you read it, all of those cookie crumbs have to be there. The second time you read it, you have to see the plot twist coming from a mile away. Otherwise, it's not a plot twist, it's just shitty writing. I don't think plot twists are important. I think it's more important to just have a plot that's entertaining. If your readers can predict what's going to happen, all it means is that your plot is logical, that the events make sense. Plot twists are stupid and I don't like them, and I want people to stop relying on them. I'm really tired of plot twists and twist villains and things like that. It's boring and stupid and makes your writing weaker. Between strong characters and epic settings, strong characters all day, all the time, hands down forever. Characters are the most important thing to me in my writing and in things I read. I always want good characters. What is the funniest typo you've ever written? The one that I remember the best is when I tried to write velvet cushions, and for some reason I wrote velvet kitchens. It has stuck with me to this day. Do you ever take random writing breaks to dance? If so, when do these breaks generally occur? No, I don't dance. I do take breaks to walk around though, and it's generally either when I'm writing something that's difficult for me, like a romantic scene or sometimes a fight scene, or when I just need to untangle a plot in my head before I can write the next scene. How many drafts do your books generally go through before publication? The book that I have published right now is the 6th draft. Most of the stuff that I've been working on is somewhere between 4 and 7, and the one that's at 7 I predict will have to have at least 10 drafts. Not really looking forward to it, but it took me 6 drafts to even get the plot settled out, because every version before that was a completely different story. So I would say between 6 and 10 seems to be where I end up. What is your favorite word and why? I like a lot of words, but I really like defenestrate, abhorrent, and audacity. They're very, very fun to say. Do you have any writing buddies? I do. I have lots of friends who like to write, and we like to talk about writing and give each other advice, and I think that's very important. But I also think it's important to have friends who aren't writers, because you can ask them for advice and run things by them and they think you're really clever. It's nice. It's nice. If you don't have any writing buddies, you can go on Goodreads because they have forums and writers hang out there a lot and swap work and things like that. Or the other best way to meet people who write would be to do National Novel Writing Month's Camp Nano event, because they put you in a little private forum chat room with other authors, and I've met lots of people doing that. What inspired you to start writing? I have been writing my entire life. When I was in kindergarten, I used to dictate my stories to the 3rd graders who would write them down for me. But as for what inspired me to sit down and say, yes, I want to be an author, everybody knows this story, but when I was 8 years old, my grandmother sent me a copy of Call of the Wild, and just there's something about that book that just gets me, and I had the most wow reaction while I was reading it. And the second that I finished it, literally as soon as I put it down, it was like, I want to do this for someone else. This is what I want to do. I want to be an author. And I started writing that very day. How long have you been writing? Officially, 22 years. What advice would you give a new writer, someone just starting out? Is this not the same question that was earlier up on the list? Other than not being obsessed with perfection, the best advice I can give you is to embrace garbage. I read somewhere that the first 1,000,000 words that you write are garbage, and only after that do you start to improve, and it kind of has been the case for me, but that's not really what I'm talking about here. I mean, embrace the fact that you might write just incredibly self-indulgent things. You should be prepared to write exactly what you want to write and enjoy it. You should be able to write the crappiest possible version of something if you need to and enjoy it. Just don't get hung up on things being good. You have to enjoy the whole process. And the best way to do that is to not only tolerate your bad writing, but enjoy your bad writing. What, in your opinion, are the most important elements of good writing? I'm sure this is supposed to be about, like, grammar and the actual writing itself, but I do not give a shit about that. I don't care how someone writes, necessarily. I don't care if your book is super beautifully written prose and it's perfect and there's no filler words, or if you write with a 2nd grade vocabulary. If your characters are good and their relationships are interesting and your plot is fun, I will read it. The most important thing to me is that you enjoy what you're writing. You can tell when someone has written something that they love versus somebody writing something because they think it'll make them popular because it's the new thing that's in. I don't like reading stuff like that. I like reading stuff that clearly has love and enjoyment behind it. So good characters, and that the author enjoys their work. Those are the things that I consider important. How do you develop your plot and characters? Subconsciously. I know that this is not the case for everyone or even most people, but I need to know as little information as possible before I write a first draft. I sometimes don't even know my characters' names yet. Really, honestly. I will usually have an idea for what kind of personalities I want my characters to have and a vague idea of what kind of setting and maybe the general plot. Maybe. Sometimes I don't even have a plot. I just go. And then afterwards, when I have a first draft, when I have a hot mess sitting in front of me, then I go through and I figure out what plot and themes and elements I put in there, and I make it look like I did it on purpose. But that's exactly why editing is so hard for me, because I already know what's going on and where it's going, and it's a lot harder for me to enjoy my work when it's not just mass chaos. How do you come up with the titles to your books? With lots of suffering. Look, I'm bad at titles. Mine tend to be pretty on the nose because I take whatever I can get, and if I can come up with something, that's what it gets stuck with. When did you first consider yourself a writer? Thanksgiving Day 2009. That was the first year that I participated in National Novel Writing Month, and even though I'd been writing for quite some time, it was the first time I had written anything to completion. Then, a few years later, I printed out a few of my books and held them in my hands, and could see the physical words on the page which only existed because I had brought them into creation, and that was the first time I felt like an author. When you're writing an emotionally draining /sexy /sad /etc. scene, how do you get in the mood? If I'm having trouble, I will often mimic my characters with their gestures and expressions, and sometimes physically acting it out can help me, which is why I don't like writing in front of other people, because I do really weird stuff, honestly. Well, now I don't like doing it because I have to do it out loud and they don't get to listen to me, but I also do that. How much world building takes place before you start writing? Almost none. I usually just pick out what vibe I want. Do you find it more challenging to write the first book in a series or to write subsequent novels? Oh, sequels. Sequels, definitely. First books are always really fun for me to write, but I'm working on, the book that I published right now is the first in a trilogy. The second one is a fourth draft right now, and I'm just really worried that the world building and the characterization and stuff won't be consistent. So for me, the subsequent stuff is always harder. Describe your perfect book hero or heroine. Gay. I mean, most of my characters are gay because otherwise what's the point? But I don't think there is a perfect hero. Every character, every hero is who they are, who they have to be for the purpose of the story. Every book has its own perfect hero. So I guess the perfect hero is the best possible hero for whatever particular story they're in. But I wouldn't say that I have any set of traits or anything that I think makes the perfect main character. Do you have a favorite character that you have written? If so, who and what makes them so special? That's such a rude question. I'm not going to say that I love every character I've ever written because some people really do just exist to make the plot move forward, but I love almost all of my characters. Otherwise, I wouldn't be writing about them. My favorite characters that I've written are all of my main characters. All of them. I can't pick. Which one of your books were the most enjoyable to write? I have this book that's incredibly pretentious, and it's about storytelling and the nature of reality and how the stories that we pass down change the way that we view the world. I told you it's pretentious. And most of it is told through characters telling stories to each other. So that one was incredibly fun to write, just coming up with all of the stories and everything along the way. I would love to make that one work as a book. I don't know if I can, but I really want to find out someday. Where do you draw inspiration from? Everywhere. I get a lot of inspiration from dreams. I also get a lot of inspiration from my friends. My one roommate in particular, a lot of the time, she'll just be like, write something like insert idea here. And I say, okay, and then I go write it. So there's several books that only exist because of her. but I also get a lot of inspiration from things that disappoint me. Like if I watch or read something and I think the characters have an interesting relationship, but it's not done as well as I would have liked, if I read something and think I would have written these characters better, then I go and I write something that has a similar relationship dynamic and write it better. So I get lots of inspiration from that. How many plot ideas are just waiting to be written? Can you tell us about one? Like a bajillion, honestly. I come up with new stuff I want to write like every day. But I have this idea that I've been kicking around where I want to write a mystery series because I love mystery novels, but I want it to be set in like kind of a medieval or even older than medieval time period. And my main character would be a carriage driver. And so she gets involved in all of these things because the victims are her clients or people her clients know, or maybe the crime scene is in a place that her route goes through. And that's how she ends up getting involved in all of it. And also she has this best friend who is a dog. He was turned into a dog, and it was supposed to be like a Beauty and the Beast thing where he was supposed to realize the error of his ways and try and fix himself so he could become human again. But he just decided that life is a lot easier as a dog. So he's still a dog and he helps her solve cases. And that's all I know about it. That's it. But I really want to try and write it someday. What books or authors have most influenced your own writing? Mercedes Lackey. I have been reading her books since I was very young, and they have definitely shaped my idea of what makes magic and what makes world building. And I think anybody who's familiar with her work could probably see the influences in my work. I think it's incredibly obvious. But other than her, Brian Jakes, also Diana Wynne Jones, definitely Jack London, because I wouldn't have started writing without him. And then there's authors like Henry Neff, whose work I really like and would like to learn from. So there's lots, but those would be some of the big ones. How many bookshelves are in your house? Bookshelves! That's so cute. Listen, we are a book-loving household. There are 10 bookcases in our house, although only 3 of them are fully mine, so 18. I have a little room to grow, but I only keep books that I think I'm going to want to read again. I buy books constantly, all the time, especially from places like Goodwill and half-price books and thrift stores, estate sales. I go hog, I buy books constantly, and I keep the ones that I think I want to read again. So I have 17 bookshelves full of books that I want to read more than once. Lots of books. I love books, guys. Anyone who is an author needs to read. They need to read widely in and outside of their own genre. They need to read things that they like and things that they dislike. So I would be surprised if someone is a writer out there who does not have very many books, unless you really like ebooks and you have an e-reader or something. So yeah, those are all of the questions. I had a good time answering them. Hopefully some of these will be helpful or at least entertaining for some people. And I guess I don't really have anything else to say about it. Please check out my book if you're interested. Middle grade fantasy, it's a lot of fun. If you like friendship and magic and adventure, definitely go look it up. Anyway, until next time, this is Lano signing off. Thank you for listening.